Hi, I'm Judy Silber, Executive Director of The Spiritual Edge. In the not-too-distant future, we'll have a brand new series for you to listen to. It's called A Prayer for Salmon, and we've been working on it for a long time. It follows the epic tale of the Winnemem-Wintu people and their clash with Northern California's Shasta Dam. I learned so much from reporting this series about the history of genocide and forced assimilation suffered by Native people across California. Those repercussions are still with us, which brings us to the stories we're sharing today. They're from Uncuffed, another really great podcast produced by KALW Public Radio. Uncuffed is a show made by people behind bars in California prisons. They share intimate stories of their struggles and triumphs and of the heartache and forgiveness taking place within their walls. For Native Americans, the sweat lodge can be an important tool of spirituality, healing, and growth. But it took a struggle to have one at San Quentin State Prison. Tommy Shakur Ross brings us the story.
It's completely dark in there. The only light you'll see is when the door is open, you can see everybody.
This is Gregory White Eagle Coates. He's describing what it's like inside of the sweat lodge.
When that door is closed, from layers of blankets, you don't see any light other than the redness of the rocks. That's when we connect to the unseen world.
The people inside pour water on fire-heated rocks. The rocks represent the ancestors. Then the lodge heats up and the men start to sweat. That sweating is an act of deep purification.
You connect with a time, a place, a way that was, beyond measure. You relax. You're able to pray and think about people that are no longer here.
Once the participants are purified, the firekeeper, who stands outside the sweat lodge, opens the door and hands in their sacred pipe.
When we use that pipe, it's a connection above to Creator. And the smoke that comes out of it, there's no self-gratification in it. When you blow that smoke out of that pipe, you're saying prayers. You're offering your prayers to the Creator.
The sweat lodge is located on the edge of the prison yard, right behind the baseball field and next to the laundry room. It's about the size of 2 basketball courts side by side. It's fenced off. There's fruit trees, flowers, and herbs. It's like an oasis in the corner of a prison. And it really is an oasis for the Native Americans here because it's set aside for their use. And it's the only place in prison where people are allowed to use tobacco and have a fire.
This was the first sweat lodge in the world in an institution in a prison.
That's Hector Frank Heredia. He works for the prison as a Native American spiritual advisor. He's Yaqui Apache Navajo Ohlone. In the 70s, Native Americans were organizing across the country for their right to practice their religion, including here at San Quentin.
The first Native American inmates, they started as a club, and they were working out of their cells, out of their housing, and eventually they got together and wanted to have a sweat lodge, and we had a lot of Native American spiritual leaders on the outside come in here and start talking to them, and then that started that in motion.
At the same time, activists occupied Alcatraz and built a sweat lodge at the former prison just a few miles away from San Quentin. They eventually marched all the way to Washington, D.C. In '78, President Carter signed the Religious Freedom Act. It said Native Americans had the right to practice their religion just like anybody. Here at San Quentin, Native American prisoners petitioned the warden to set aside a space for them to use. When the occupation at Alcatraz got shut down, activists had to move the sweat lodge.
And so they brought the fireplace here.
The sweat lodge is a Lakota tradition. Hector says the Lakota elders wanted men inside the prison to be able to do this sacred practice. So they moved the sacred coals and wood from Alcatraz to San Quentin.
For these brothers, these Native American brothers, to get well, to learn their culture, to learn their languages, to learn the ways. There's a lot of different ways, but it was a universal way of bringing our people together into this hoop, mending the hoop, as they said.
White Eagle got to San Quentin the same year the Sweat Lodge was built. He tells me that elders appointed a man named Archie Fire Lame Deer to come inside to help build the lodge.
He brought us all together, and there was probably over 70 brothers. He brought us all in the circle and explained what we were going to do. He asked the brothers that had built lodges before to be there to help the other brothers who didn't know what's going on.
But first,
he went in there and saged the whole thing down with sage and his eagle wing. He had a huge eagle wing.
The lodge was put together in 4 sections.
The west and the east direction were tied, 4 poles, 4 willow, and then they brought the north and south direction together. 16 all the way around. Each one has a prayer.
The willow sticks form the skeleton of the hut, which is then covered with blankets. After the Sweat Lodge was complete, White Eagle took part in his very first Sweat Lodge ceremony.
We went around the fire, asked Archie permission. They entered the lodge. As we're going in, our brother's saging us off again with the eagle feather and the sage. We get down on all fours. That's to show that we are humbling ourselves, that we're no better than anything else the Creator has created.
Before White Eagle came to prison, he says he had no connection to his native heritage.
I'm what they call a sidewalk Indian, because before I come to prison, I didn't know these ways. I never participated these ways. So for me to share these things, sometimes it's hard because I'm nobody. These guys were from reservations. I was from the city. You know?
Now White Eagle goes into the Sweat Lodge almost every week. He's not paroling anytime soon, but he's finding his way home through spiritual practice. Hector says that's true for a lot of Native Americans at San Quentin. Many of them didn't grow up with their tribe's traditions, but here in prison, they are at least able to learn this one.
And the elders used to tell us, this may not be your way, but come this way, this red road way, and you'll find your way. You'll find your people. You'll find your songs. You'll find your language. You'll find your medicine. You'll find your fireplace. You'll find yourself.
Inside San Quentin, I'm Tommy Shakur Ross with San Quentin Radio. I'm out.
Tommy Shakur Ross is a producer in KALW's radio program at San Quentin State Prison. He reported this story in 2019. We have one more story from Uncuffed for you today. But before we get to it, I want to let you know that next week we'll be releasing a special episode of The Spiritual Edge. As Muslims around the world celebrate Ramadan, we invite you to listen to our Becoming Muslim 1-hour documentary special. We're dropping it in your feed April 1. Give it a listen and share it with a friend. Now back to San Quentin Prison, where about 100 people identify as Native American. Eldridge Lee Yazzie is Navajo and has been incarcerated for 27 years. When faced with a prison rule that conflicted with his spirituality, he fought for the right to keep what was meaningful to him. Tommy Shakur Ross has the story.
Like many Navajo people, Yazzie wears his hair long.
I wear it in a braided up ponytail, and when I dance, I traditionally wear it in 2 braids.
Yazzie has wore his hair this way his whole life. He was born on a reservation in New Mexico. When he was 3, his family moved to L.A. There, He was one of the few Native American kids in his school.
Kids didn't really know the culture that I was from, so, we were always ridiculed about, having our hair long, calling us a girl.
Yazi grew up learning about his Native American heritage.
Without my relatives and my ancestors passing down the traditions and ceremonies, we'd be lost.
But then, as Yazi got older, he got involved with the gang.
I took up the street life and kind of went away from my culture.
That street life ended him up in prison with a 15-to-life sentence in 1992. Even in prison, he wore his hair long. It wasn't a big deal. But then a few years later, a prisoner down in San Diego cut his hair and used that new look as a disguise to escape. So the California Department of Corrections, CDC, made a new rule. Prisoners could no longer grow their hair more than 3 inches long. And beards, you had to shave that completely off.
To punish the whole population because of one person, I felt that was wrong, especially when it didn't have nothing to do with us. I thought it was absurd because they didn't even have the consideration of, our beliefs.
Be that as it may, the rule meant Yazi would have to cut his hair, but that defied his cultural and spiritual practices. So he and other Native Americans in prison felt like they had to take a stand.
We all came together and made a decision. I mean, that's easy for you to say that me having short hair, that, it makes me not less than a man, but, you're not Native American. Put it like this, you'd feel naked. I would feel naked myself.
Yazi says his aunts and uncles went through a similar situation when they grew up.
The government used to haul them away to government schools and forcibly make them cut their hair.
Hair is considered an extension of a person's spirit.
When we go to our heaven, we go with our hair on. Our hair are just roots of our nerves. We just keep it growing.
That's Hector Heredia. He works at the prison as the Native American spiritual advisor. He says many Native Americans only cut their hair when it's for a spiritual reason.
If there's a death in our family, some tribes will cut it off, or you get in trouble or something, they'll cut your hair off. It's just another symbol of our identities as who we are as men, as women. We've always had long hair, and that's just our culture.
That's why when the prison told Yazi to cut his hair, he flat out refused. So did other Native Americans and some Rastafarians who refused to cut their long dreadlocks. Some Muslims who wore long beards refused to shave. CDC punished protesters by adding time to their sentences
and letting us out the hottest part of the day,
limiting what they could buy at the commissary,
and taking all our appliances away. It was difficult, but that's just giving us more strength and letting them know that, this is who we are, and we're not caring how far you can push us. I'm not trying to be an a-hole or anything, but, I want them to understand what I went through and being proud of my heritage.
Yazi refused to cut his hair for 8 years. Then in 2006, a court decision found this grooming rule unconstitutional. While Yazi had been protesting, the prison administration added time to his sentence. So he filed an appeal to remove that extra time, arguing that his rights had been violated when they instituted the grooming standard. The prison granted his appeal. But after all that, Yazi cut his hair off anyway. It happened when his Aunt Lou was diagnosed with cancer and undergoing chemotherapy.
When she got this disease, it started making me think, she's going through radiation, she ain't got no hair. So I wanted to be a part of what she was going through, even though I'm not there physically, to let her know that, I'm with you on this fight.
Yazi made the choice to cut his hair in a very public way during a spiritual ceremony. It happened at San Quentin's annual Breast Cancer Awareness Walk. Yazi came on stage. 2 members of the Native American community at San Quentin, Robin and Mike, were there to cut his hair.
Robin and Mike came on stage and blessed it, purified it with sage and cedar, and Robin was singing the whole time.
Offer up the spirit calling song.
Cut it off to the ponytail, and then I told Mike, I'll go ahead and shave it all the way off. It was a life change because I can't recall the last time I had ever my hair that short, except for I think maybe when I was a baby.
Yazi's ponytail was about 3 feet long. He donated to a group that makes wigs for cancer survivors. 6 years after Yazi's haircutting ceremony, his hair is back to being long, all the way down his back.
Man, I love my hair.
In San Quentin, I'm Tommy Shakur Ross with San Quentin Radio. I'm out.
Your daddy loves you. Yes, he does. You puts no one above you. 'Cause you're my girl. Dad's pretty girl, baby. Your daddy loves you.
Tommy Shakur Ross is a producer in KALW's radio program at San Quentin State Prison. He reported this story in 2019. Uncuffed's work in prisons is supported by the California Arts Council and the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. The producers fact-check content to the best of their ability. All content is approved by an information officer. Thanks so much to Uncuffed for sharing these stories with us. You can listen to more by going to www.uncuffed.org. Check your feed next week for our 1-hour special documentary version of Becoming Muslim, profiles of Americans who choose Islam and what happens to them. After that, we'll be introducing our next series, which we're super excited about. It's called A Prayer for Salmon. It's about the Winnemem-Wintu people and their clash with Northern California's Shasta Dam. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app, follow us on NPR One, or ask your smart speaker to play the latest from The Spiritual Edge. I'm Judy Silber. Thanks for listening.